Hey guys, what's happening? And welcome to another episode of Metal Viking with me, your host Viking. Today I'm doing another album review, and today's album review is last year's Cannibal Corpse release, which is a Skeletal domain. Now I'm going to level with you guys, and I'm going to be honest with you here. I've never been a Cannibal Corpse fan. I've heard of them. I was introduced to them thanks to Zardonic's remix of their song Perverse Suffering, and by hearing their song Hammer Smashed Face on one of the they made a cameo appearance in one of the Ace Ventura films with Jim Carrey in it. So those practically have been the only two real songs I've heard of theirs. Then recently I heard their remix of Demented Aggression by the DJ Heavy Grinder. And after listening to that remix, I decided to go check these guys out, especially also after watching several reviews of this band by other YouTubers such as Cover Killer Nation and Ranta and Shades, etc. So basically, yeah, I decided to go check out this band. And it was pointed out in some of these reviews, especially by Cover Killer Nation, that this band, Cannibal Corpse, is one of the most influential bands in metal. They are, and I quote from him, the Metallica of death metal. They sell the most records in comparison to most death metal bands, and they are the most well known, and the most influential. They don't just influence metal artists; they've been known to influence people of other genres. For example, Zardonic is influenced by Cannibal Corpse. Heavy Grinder, who, for those of you who do know, Heavy Grinder is an electro house EDM DJ, and she's very much influenced by Cannibal Corpse. And not only that, there are a lot of metal bands who have had such a huge impact on some of the bands today, and even on deathcore itself. So, like, I can see their influence in bands such as Suicide Silence and Whitechapel and several other deathcore bands that are quite popular within the scene. Um, and you can even hear their influence in a more recent death metal bands such as Death Clock, which is the band that does the music and is the fictitious band in the animated TV comedy Metalocalypse. And this band does. After listening to this album, I now have a newfound respect for this band. I can actually see now why some aspects of them that some of my favorite bands have incorporated into their music, and I actually now have a lot more respect for this band. Now, I couldn't really care about this band at first. To me, I am fully aware of some of the controversy they have caused with regards to lyrics, and their artwork, and even some of their promotional stuff like their merchandise, etc. Because their album art and everything and what they sing about is pretty gruesome stuff. Basically, to quote George Fisher, he says that the lyrics behind these songs are basically mini horror stories. The band is influenced so much by horror movies that is why their stuff is quite straightforward. It's not like some kind of old Victorian kind of horror, poetic kind of horror lyrics. It's just more like something you'd hear out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or one of these modern horror films. And despite all that, even the band themselves, they say that even though they sin about this stuff, George Fisher has actually said that in comparison to back then, in the old days, where people actually used to kill each other for entertainment, in gladiator pits, whatever, or even in public, and do all sorts of cruel things to one another, and all these other weird torture methods that human beings come up with. But like, it used to be done for entertainment back in the day, and he even said that a band just singing about stuff like that doesn't mean it has an influence, because he even says, and I agree with him, we've evolved to such a point today that that kind of stuff is no longer allowed. And he even said that if you listen to the music and think that you must go out and do whatever is being said in there, then he says you're born fucked up. And he says music has no influence on what people do. People are either born normal or fucked up. And I have to agree with the statement to a point, especially since as a metalhead, a lot of people have said to me, like, they wouldn't even know I was a metalhead until I mentioned that I listen to metal. And then they just come to the assumption that metalheads are people who just hate everything in life, or angry people, or getting into fights, etc., and love all the macabre and everything. It's not like that. I should, to be honest, I should actually make a video in the future with misconceptions about metalheads, which I plan on doing very soon. So anyway, back to this album. This album has 12 tracks. This album, it's the very first Cannibal Corpse full album that I've listened to. As I've mentioned before, the only older stuff of theirs that I have listened to is Hammer Smashed Face, the remix of Perverse Suffering, which doesn't really count, but still, it's got more or less the same melody as the original, and the remix of Demented Aggression. So that's more or less all I've heard from them prior to listening to this. Now I listened to this and I've got to say I really enjoyed this album. It's heavy, it's aggressive, and overall it's just freaking insane. You don't need like any other reason to just start headbanging to this album. This is a really good album. I can really see how this band has had an impact on a lot of the modern bands. These guys, they really know how to compose music. Their drummer is absolutely fantastic. The guitarists, the lead guitarist, he can shred. He can shred like there's no tomorrow. These guys are very talented, and George Fisher is a killer vocalist. I first heard his vocals without any like remix, etc., because Cannibal Corpse used to have a different lead singer when they first started out until George Fisher joined. I first heard George Fisher's actual vocals on a guest appearance that he did with on the recent Suicide Silence album, You Can't Stop Me. The song is called Control, so go check that song out if you haven't. But he's just got George Fisher. He's just got this really powerful voice, and it's very distinguished in comparison to a lot of death metal artists. And even if he had to do deathcore music, he is very distinguishable. You'd be able to recognize him amongst a vast sea of death metal vocalists. George Fisher is a very talented guy. Yeah, and basically this album really fast paced. Every track is fast, like death metal should be. And obviously, with regards to the lyrics, pretty gruesome stuff. But as I've said before, these guys are heavily influenced by horror movies, mainly slashers. So while the lyrics may be quite blunt and straightforward, it's their style, it's their band, it's their baby. They can do whatever they want. And with regards to that, I would like to mention a fun fact for those of you who don't know. This band has actually caused so much controversy with their music and their merchandise, etc., that their albums have been banned in certain countries. They've been banned from performing in certain countries too, such as Russia. And yeah, these guys have been the center of controversy for quite some time. But trust me when I say this, there are a lot worse bands out there. And these guys, I've watched Cannibal Corpse now recently in interviews, and they are very nice people. trust me, you can get a lot worse than this. So yeah. So as I said before, I couldn't really have cared about this band, but I'm actually glad I listened to this album. This is a very good album. The production quality is absolutely fantastic. It's superb in comparison to their older stuff. Like if you actually go and listen to Hammer Smashed Face, it's typical of the 90s recording style, the production style. It's actually, although heavy, at the same time, it's got that very old-fashioned sound to it, like from what you'd hear from old Metallica albums and old albums by like Slayer and Megadeth. It's got that kind of old recording feel to it. So that's with the older stuff. But now with new recording technology, the production quality of this album is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, so overall, I'd give this album a 74 out of 100. Reason being is because, well, it's the first album of theirs I've listened to, and mainly because it's still going to take me some time to get my head around what this band actually does. So, as I said before, it's a really good album. I'd definitely listen to it a few times over and over again, but until I get my head around what influences this band and their music, it's gonna take some time. But I will definitely review some more of their stuff in the future on my channel. And that concludes today's review. I'm Viking, and until next time, have a kick-ass day.